In my previous video about Linux Mint 19 with the Cinnamon desktop, I really didn't go into much detail about some of the system settings and different ways you can customize the Cinnamon desktop. So in this video, I'm going to go into more detail. Here I have an opportunity to install some updates. So I'm clicking on the update symbol, and it lists the updates. And if you notice, it no longer has them ranked in order of preference. That's been abandoned in favor of the time shift backup tool. I always installed all of the updates anyway, so this doesn't affect me whatsoever. And I don't use time shift, as I said. So I'm going to ignore this entreaty to set up system snapshots, and I'm going to click on Install Updates. Enter my password. And authenticate. Now, if I want to see more, I can click on Show Individual Files. It's installing Linux headers for the current kernel version, 4.15. Now I can click on Details here and see more about the actual installation. The changes are applied, and I can close the window and wait for this to refresh. And my system is up to date. So that's that I haven't shown before. Now in my previous video I did show how to change the desktop background, and so I'm going to just do that very briefly here. Right click on the desktop, left click on Change Desktop Background. These are the Linux Mint backgrounds. These are the Tara backgrounds, and of course you can add more in your Pictures folder if you wish. And I'm not really going to change any of these now, but just to show you what would happen. So I'm going to go back to this abstraction by Jan Kaluza and close this. Another thing I've shown how to do previously in my video about the Cinnamon desktop in Gecko Linux rolling was how to increase the size of the menu. Now some people think the menu is too big already. That's why they don't like it. But I think it's too short because I don't like to have to scroll down so much when I'm trying to open an application from the menu. So you can increase the size of the menu up to a point by adding things to the bar over here on the left. So I'm going to do that and then come back shortly. And this is as big as you can make it. So those are two things I've already discussed. Regarding the panel, you can move it off the bottom onto any of the four sides. Just right-click on the panel, left-click on Modify Panel, and then left-click on the Move Panel. And when you do, a little ghost of a panel appears on all four sides. You simply select one of those by left-clicking on it, or you can press Escape to cancel the procedure. So I'm going to left-click on the left side. Wait a minute, and the panel appears over there. So if I want to go back, Modify Panel, Move Panel, I'm going to left-click on the top, and it appears over there. And at the same time, my minimized application, which is Simple Screen Recorder, appears, and I don't want that, so I'm going to minimize it again. I'm going to do it again. This time I'm going to move it to the right. And back to the bottom. So that's how to move the panel. You can add applets to the panel. I normally don't use this, but just to demonstrate a point, I'm going to add the trash applet and then click on Add. And what happens? The trash applet appears over here. I don't use the trash applet, so I'm going to right-click on that and left-click on Remove Trash. And under Panel Settings, you can change the way the panel appears. It currently says Always Show Panel. You can change that to Auto Hide and Intelligently Hide the panel. I'm going to leave it on Always Show Panel. Now you can use a customized panel size. Otherwise, it's defined by the theme. If I enable this, takes a while, but I can make it larger. And I would think you would want to do this if you have trouble seeing small things. It's either larger or smaller, but it doesn't really give you a number of pixels and height or anything. You can just eye that in. You can add another panel. Add New Panel. And then again it shows a ghost panel on all four sides. I'm going to add this one to the top. However, I really don't want to use it, so I'm going to right-click on that panel, left-click on Modify Panel, and then left-click on Remove Panel. And it removes that panel. Now you may have noticed that the default icons in the Cinnamon desktop in Mint 19 are different than they were in previous versions. So I'm going to see if I can change those icons. I'm going to go here to System Settings, and notice, as I said before, when you hover over these icons, the description appears on the lower right corner. It says System Settings Control Center. So under Appearance, I have four things: backgrounds, effects, fonts, and themes. We look under Themes. This is window borders. When it comes to icons, make a note of the default. It's Mint Y. And if you click on the menu, you'll see what those icons look like. Now when you go in here, all it shows is folder icons. It shows a lot of different colored folders. But if you change your Mint Y to Mint X, for instance, you'll see that those are different icons. These are the ones you're probably used to. Or you can go even further back to GNOME, for instance. Those are different yet. So that's how you change icons. It isn't quite apparent, but you're not just changing folder icons. On the other hand, if you go to the different colors and you stay within Mint Y, you're not going to change the other Mint Y icons, just the color of the folders. So let's see, controls, mouse pointer, desktop. When it comes to desktops, let me warn you that if you want to know which desktop is currently selected, make a note of it. It's Linux Mint by default, but when you get into changing them, there's no indication of which one has been selected. So if you want to go back to this, remember it. So I click on this, and it gives me several other options. Cinnamon, Mint Y Dark, Mint X Pink, etc. If you want a light one, here's Mint Y. I'm going to go back to Linux Mint. Let me look under controls. Again, if you want to know which one was installed by default, you better remember it because it won't be marked later. It happens to be Mint Y here. I think I'm going to change that to Mint Y Dark. That changes not only the button, it changes the whole window. As a matter of fact, the only thing that doesn't change is the line with the buttons on it, which is somewhat counterintuitive. So I'm going to change that back to Mint Y. If I go to Window Borders, again, remember where you were if you want to go back to it. And I go to Mint Y Dark now. It changes the line with the buttons on it, but not the rest of the window. So what if I go back to Controls, and I now go to Mint Y Dark? No, it changes the window, but not the line with the buttons on it. So it's rather peculiar, but that's the way it works. If you don't like this trial and error approach, there is a website, the official Cinnamon Spices website, and I'll leave the link in the notes below the video. This is the official add-ons repository, so if you want themes, and you can select popular, latest, or you could search for them by name. There's a lot of different themes here, so if you want to go over the whole selection of what's available, this website is an easier way of doing it than downloading them by trial and error from the application. And then there are applets, and again, popular, latest, search. There are desklets. And there are extensions. Takes a while. Transparent panels, Cinnamon Maximus. You can get the desktop cube and all kinds of other gimmicks if you want them. wobbly windows, etc. Remember that Cinnamon was originally a fork of GNOME 3, but it's since become its own independent desktop, so the desklets and applets and extensions for GNOME do not work on Cinnamon, but Cinnamon has its own. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of that. Now let's take a look at the desklets. Actually, I'm just going to right-click on the desktop and then click on Add Desklets. You could also do that from the system settings, but this is an easy way. The clock desklet is the one I usually install, and it works pretty well. Remember, though, that these desklets are created by third parties. Some of them are not so great. But I made the mistake of installing the weather desklet, and I had to download that. It wasn't here by default. What I did is I clicked on download and chose the weather desklet and downloaded it. There's an exclamation point here, and it says this desklet contains function calls that could potentially cause Cinnamon to crash or freeze. If you are experiencing crashes or freezing, please try removing it. This should be sort of an advanced warning that this may not work very well. This X here uninstalls it. Are you sure you want to completely remove bbcwx at oak-wood.co.uk? Yes. And it's gone. So I guess I'm reduced to installing the same old clock desklet. And I get 1113. And I'm going to click on configure on this one. Font size, I like the font size. Text color, I like that. Use a custom date format. It gives me the date format here, but there are no clues that help me select the new format code. So I literally have to look those up. Let me see. Import from a file, export to a file, reset to default. This is very difficult to use. I can look these codes up as I've done before, but there's no help here. Now, if I right-click on the date and time in the panel, I have configure. And I can click on use a custom date format here, and I'm just going to copy this. And then I'm going to paste it in here. And nothing whatsoever happens. Let me see what happens if I reboot. And rebooting did the trick. It now shows Wednesday, July 4th, 11:21. I may have to look at that time again. I'm not sure whether that's 12-hour or 24-hour. But I'll do that later. And you can drag this and move it around wherever you want. I mentioned in my last video that I enabled the top right hot corner to show the Workspace Grid. And I showed how to do this in my Gecko Linux review. But just to cover that briefly again, going back up here to Settings, Preferences, and Hot corners. You can see that this one is green. I've enabled it, and it shows all workspaces. I want to try another one over here. See what else I have available. Show all windows. That would be the windows in the current desktop. Show the desktop. That minimizes all open windows in the current desktop, or run a command. Now, I already have a show desktop icon just to the right of the menu, so there's no point in having a show the desktop. And showing all windows doesn't appeal to me because the current one already shows all windows in all of the workspaces, which is more useful, so I'm not going to do anything here. The most useful one is the one that I've already enabled. So I would say that Cinnamon is not the most configurable desktop, but you have to remember the history of Cinnamon. It was designed as a substitute for GNOME 3, which was wildly unpopular when it was introduced, and I would say that Cinnamon is a considerable advancement on GNOME 3 in terms of ease of use. So if you want an advanced desktop based on the GTK 3 framework, but something that is no longer closely related to GNOME 3, it's its own desktop. It has been since version 2, and this is version 3.8. Cinnamon is a good alternative. This is XRAM Tech. Thanks for watching.